Yes, the minute I became corresponding author in the last year of my PhD, ever since then I've received predatory publishing emails. You can definitely tell when they greet you with eminent professor, even though that's not your title, and they quote the one paper you are corresponding author on. So it is something that happens a lot.
This happens on a regular basis. I think most recent was the Iranian Journal of Dentistry. That, strangely enough, I don't have a track record in dentistry or in Iranian versions of that. This happens all the time, and I think often if you receive invitations from people that you don't know or outside of your field, you've just got to ignore it. And even I think there are some journals that are on that kind of cusp of predatory journals that just have very high acceptance rates, and they have low citation rates, and they don't tend to be very good quality. And so I tend to avoid those. Often, even if I'm getting asked by people from research groups that I know and that I'm familiar with, if it's a journal that I think is perhaps not on the not in that high quality range, and I know they kind of tend to publish a lot of things with very little low quality standards, I would probably avoid those.
Most of them are really easy to pick up that it's a predatory journal. Like a lot of them will start with some really like, "Dear most esteemed Professor Turon," or whatever, and you're like, you clearly don't know who I am. They'll often be in areas that you don't publish in, so I'll get invited to submit something to like a chemical engineering journal, and it's like, well, clearly this is not my field. So most of them are really easy to identify, and you can just delete them outright. There's been a couple of I guess ones that sometimes that have just, I haven't heard of the journal before, but it looks like it could be potentially a little bit relevant to my field, or like I've received a request to review for one of these journals that I've never heard of. So I'll usually at that point do a little bit of investigating to try and find out, is the journal even legit, and what the process is, and if it's not a legitimate journal, like obviously it gets deleted straight away. But yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit trickier and you have to do a bit of research.
I generally delete them because I think there's a few things you can tell straight away if it's predatory. Like they have a lot of links for you to click, like unsubscribe links, which I think reputable journals don't have. They use alternate letters or different fonts in the same sentences or even in the same words, which is unusual. But if I'm not sure if it's predatory or reputable as an early career researcher, I don't really get asked to submit a lot. So it's hard for me to tell what's legitimate. I would look at the editorial board and see if I know the names, see what kind of impact they've made in my field, and if any of my colleagues have published there before. And yeah, generally it's always predatory.
So I had an invitation recently to guest edit a special issue of a journal I'd never heard of. It's hard because it's flattering, and we love thinking like, oh, someone wants our expertise. But I hadn't heard of the journal, and I've been doing this long enough that I felt like I should have. So I just did a little bit of searching on the ISBN. I looked in SkyMago, which isn't, it's not 100% because not all of our journals are in SkyMago. My beloved John Donne Journal's not in SkyMago, and it's still a valid journal. But I looked in Google Scholar, and I was just kind of went like, this doesn't really seem, even if it's legitimate, it's not going to have the kind of reach that I want it to have. So I'm still not 100% sure it was predatory, but I enough alarm bells kind of went off. The kind of question mark for me was that there were people on the advisory board whose names I recognized, but I don't even know how real that is, or if they're just pulling people's names off websites and saying, oh yeah, they're editorial board members.
So you can't guarantee that the publication will be reviewed, and if it is reviewed, that it's reviewed at the academic level that is required for peer review of a journal. Sometimes they are looking for money and just asking for publication fees. I haven't experienced or haven't seen anyone actually pay and then get nothing, but I have heard that that can be the case. And they just, it doesn't look good on your CV. It doesn't build your career to be publishing in the predatory journals, because it's just not taken seriously in the end, the outputs from that.
Publishing in a predatory journal undermines your credibility and completely sometimes creates an image that you can't reverse back. Okay, I remember 15 years ago, some of my colleagues unfortunately fell into that trap, and there wasn't enough advisory mechanism at that stage. This is post-PhD, and it's not easy to hide those publications in the new emerging technologies and websites. Some more other come out. But I think people do understand, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't enough mechanisms to distinguish them. But now, if you publish, there's no excuse. I think, there'll be very limited excuses to why someone got conned into a predatory journal, because there's enough advice around where to publish and where not to publish.
But really, you don't want to publish in a predatory journal because you will compromise your reputation. And it's not just about having a quantity of publications on your CV. People who are reviewing your CVs for grant applications or publications or promotions or anything else are going to look at what those journals are, and people know which are the real journals and which are the dodgy pay to publish and those kinds of things. So you don't want to damage your reputation through doing that. And also, if you publish in a predatory journal, it's very difficult to get back. So you might not know at the time that it's a predatory journal. You might get tricked. But then getting that work back so you can publish it properly would be quite a task. And I've heard lots of horror stories of people trying to clean up the mess after they've been taken for a ride by a predatory journal. So I urge people not to do it deliberately, because that will come back to bite you later, even if it bumped you up in the metrics in the short term. And I'd urge people to be very careful not to do it by accident as well.
And the biggest thing is, if you do submit an article to those journals and they do publish it, then you have spoiled the outcome of that research. You can't publish it anywhere else. No other journal will have it. No reputable journal will have it, because you've already published it elsewhere with a predatory journal. And it's spoiled, and nobody will cite it because they can't cite it because it's not in a reputable source. So the worst outcome is that your years and years of hard work and research is finished. You have to. You can't use it again. You have to start over. So there are huge risks. Steer clear. Check with someone experienced.